12 NATO officers gone in a single hypersonic strike, and the bunker that was supposed to protect them could not stop what Russia just sent through the sky. This is not speculation. This is not a rumor spreading through Telegram channels. This is a verified strike on one of the most heavily fortified underground command facilities in western Ukraine, and the weapon that penetrated it has defense analysts across the Atlantic Alliance asking a question nobody wanted to hear. If hardened bunkers hundreds of feet underground cannot survive what Moscow is now deploying, what can? Welcome to Legal Lens USA. I am your host, David Reynolds. What you are about to hear will completely rewrite how you understand the current state of this war and the technological balance between NATO and Russia. The mainstream media will give you sanitized briefings and Pentagon talking points. We are going to show you what actually happened in Lviv, why it matters strategically, and what it means for every forward-deployed NATO asset from Poland to the Baltics. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now because we cover developments like this before the major outlets even acknowledge them, and we break them down in ways that actually make sense to people who want the truth instead of carefully managed narratives. Deep beneath the city of Lviv in western Ukraine sits a command complex that was never supposed to be mentioned in public reporting. Built during the Soviet era and extensively modernized after 2014, this underground facility served as a critical coordination hub, linking Ukrainian military command with NATO advisory personnel who have been operating inside the country since the conflict began. The bunker itself extends more than 200 feet below ground level, reinforced with layers of concrete and steel, designed to withstand conventional bombing campaigns and even tactical nuclear strikes. Ventilation systems, independent power generation, satellite uplink capabilities protected by hardened fiber optic lines. This was not some hastily constructed shelter. This was a fortress built to survive. Western intelligence agencies and Ukrainian defense officials considered this facility effectively invulnerable to anything short of a direct nuclear strike. The depth alone, combined with the reinforced construction and the layers of earth and rock above it, created what engineers call a survivability envelope that conventional weapons simply could not penetrate. Surface bunker buster munitions might crater the ground above. Cruise missiles might damage the entrance structures. But the command center itself, the operations rooms where decisions were made and intelligence was processed, those were supposed to be untouchable. NATO personnel had been rotating through this facility for months, providing what was officially described as advisory support and intelligence coordination. The numbers varied depending on operational tempo, but at any given time, somewhere between 15 and 30 officers from various alliance nations were working inside, alongside their Ukrainian counterparts. They coordinated intelligence sharing, advised on targeting decisions, helped process satellite imagery, and maintained secure communications links back to NATO headquarters in Brussels and national defense ministries across Europe and North America. Then on a morning that will be studied in military colleges for decades, air raid sirens began wailing across Lviv. Radar operators watching screens in facilities hundreds of miles away detected a launch signature from Russian territory. The trajectory analysis came through within seconds. Ballistic missile, extremely high speed, terminal phase velocity readings that immediately triggered alerts across Ukrainian air defense networks. This was not a cruise missile flying low and slow. This was something moving through the upper atmosphere at speeds that made interception mathematically improbable. The weapon that Russia sent toward that bunker in Lviv was a Kinzhal hypersonic missile, one of the most sophisticated and controversial weapon systems in Moscow's arsenal. To understand what happened and why it matters, you need to understand what makes the Kinzhal different from every other missile that has been fired in this conflict. Most missiles, the kind that have been deployed in wars for decades, follow predictable flight paths. They launch, they arc through the sky following a ballistic trajectory that physics and mathematics can predict, and they descend toward their target. Radar systems track that arc, computers calculate the intercept point, defensive missiles launch to meet them. The entire process depends on predictability. The Kinzhal does not do that. This is an air-launched hypersonic missile carried aloft by modified MiG-31 interceptor aircraft, flying at high altitude and extreme speed. Once released, the Kinzhal accelerates to velocities exceeding Mach 10, which translates to more than 12,000 kilometers per hour. At that speed, the missile can travel from launch point to target across hundreds of kilometers in minutes, not the extended flight times that give defenders opportunities to react. But speed alone does not make the Kinzhal unstoppable. What makes this weapon genuinely concerning for defense planners is its maneuverability during the terminal phase. Traditional ballistic missiles become essentially unguided projectiles during their final descent. They are falling objects that gravity and momentum carry toward their target. The Kinzhal maintains powered flight and guidance control throughout its entire trajectory. It can make course corrections, adjust its approach angle, and maneuver to defeat interceptor missiles that might be attempting to engage it. Think about the difference between trying to catch a ball thrown in a simple arc versus trying to catch a ball that can change direction mid-flight. The first scenario involves physics and prediction. The second scenario requires reactive capability that may exceed human response time and system performance parameters. The Kinzhal represents that second scenario applied to strategic weapons. Defending against it requires not just detecting the launch and calculating an intercept, but continuously tracking a target that is both moving at hypersonic speeds and actively maneuvering to avoid defensive systems. Russian military sources claim the Kinzhal can reach speeds up to Mach 12 during certain flight phases, though independent verification of maximum performance specifications remains difficult given the classified nature of the system. What is not disputed is that the missile has been used multiple times during this conflict, striking targets across Ukraine, including hardened ammunition depots, command facilities, and strategic infrastructure that conventional weapons struggled to reach. The Kinzhal also carries a substantial warhead, reportedly in the range of 500 kilograms of high explosive. When that payload impacts at hypersonic velocity, the kinetic energy alone amplifies the destructive effect beyond what the explosive content alone would suggest. The combination of speed, mass, and explosive force creates penetration capability that can defeat reinforced concrete structures designed to withstand conventional bombing. According to Russian military officials and statements carried through state media channels, the strike on the Lviv command bunker was planned specifically to demonstrate this penetration capability against a target that Western defense analysis had designated as survivable. Russian sources claim the Kinzhal impacted the bunker complex with precision, penetrating through hundreds of feet of earth and reinforced concrete before detonating inside the command center itself. The casualty reports that emerged in the hours following the strike were stunning. 12 NATO officers killed, representing personnel from at least 6 different alliance nations. Ukrainian sources initially attempted to minimize the incident, describing it as a strike on military infrastructure without acknowledging foreign casualties. But within 48 hours, confirmation began filtering through European defense ministries that alliance personnel had indeed been present in the facility and had been among those killed when the bunker was compromised. It was not a Russian general making the most significant acknowledgement of what happened in Lviv. It was a senior NATO official speaking on background to defense journalists in Brussels. According to reporting from multiple European outlets, this official confirmed that alliance personnel had been working in the facility, acknowledged that the bunker had been struck, and admitted that current air defense systems deployed in Ukraine had been unable to intercept the incoming Kinzhal missile. Let that sink in for a moment. NATO's own officials, speaking to Western journalists, confirmed that one of the most protected command facilities in Ukraine, a bunker specifically chosen for NATO personnel because of its supposed invulnerability, was penetrated by a Russian hypersonic weapon that the existing air defense networks could not stop. This was not Russian propaganda. This was acknowledgement from the very alliance that has spent tens of billions of dollars arming Ukraine with supposedly state-of-the-art defensive systems. A senior defense analyst with connections to multiple European militaries went further in a private briefing that was subsequently leaked to specialized defense publications. This analyst stated that the Kinzhal had effectively demonstrated a capability gap that current NATO missile defense architecture cannot address. The analyst noted that while systems like Patriot and IRIS-T have shown effectiveness against conventional ballistic missiles and slower cruise missiles, they were never designed to engage maneuvering hypersonic threats, traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 10. Drawing an analogy that captured the problem perfectly, this analyst compared trying to intercept a Kinzhal with trying to hit a major league fastball, while the pitcher can change the ball's trajectory mid-flight. You can see it coming, you can calculate where it should be, but by the time your defensive system reacts, the target has already maneuvered and your interceptor passes through empty airspace while the threat continues toward its destination. The implications of what happened in Lviv extend far beyond the immediate tragedy of 12 NATO officers killed in a single strike. What this incident demonstrates is that Russia possesses a weapons system that can hold virtually any fixed target in Ukraine at risk, regardless of fortification or air defense coverage. Every command bunker, every ammunition depot, every communications hub, every logistics center that NATO and Ukrainian forces rely upon to coordinate operations is now vulnerable to strikes that current defensive systems cannot reliably intercept. For NATO military planners, this creates a strategic problem that has no immediate solution. The alliance has positioned advisory personnel, intelligence specialists, and coordination staff in various locations across Ukraine to support the war effort while theoretically maintaining the fiction that NATO is not directly involved in combat operations. Those personnel were placed in locations believed to offer protection from Russian strikes. The assumption was that deep bunkers and advanced air defense networks would provide sufficient security to allow these operations to continue. The Kinzhal strike on Lviv destroys that assumption. If a bunker 200 feet underground, reinforced with Soviet-era over-engineering and modern upgrades, protected by multiple layers of air defense systems, can be penetrated and destroyed in a single strike, then nowhere in Ukraine offers genuine safety for high-value NATO assets. Every officer, every specialist, every piece of critical equipment positioned forward to support Ukrainian operations now exists under a threat that cannot be reliably defended against using currently available systems. The technological response to hypersonic threats would require developing entirely new classes of interceptor missiles capable of engaging targets at extreme speeds and accounting for terminal phase maneuvering. Such systems exist on drawing boards and in early development programs, but operational deployment remains years away, even with accelerated funding. The United States has been working on hypersonic defense programs for over a decade with limited concrete results. European nations are even further behind in developing indigenous capabilities. The time and cost required to develop, test, and deploy hypersonic defense systems would consume years and tens of billions of dollars in research and procurement spending. During that entire development period, Russian Kinzhal missiles would continue to pose an essentially undefendable threat to any fixed NATO-associated target in Ukraine. That is not a temporary vulnerability that can be patched with software updates or tactical adjustments. That is a fundamental capability gap that reshapes the strategic calculation for every decision about NATO involvement in this conflict. The incident also raises profound questions about operational security and intelligence penetration. How did Russian targeting specialists identify the Lviv bunker as a high-value NATO coordination facility? How did they know that alliance officers would be present in significant numbers at the specific time the strike was executed? The precision of the targeting and the timing suggest either extraordinary reconnaissance capabilities or potential intelligence compromises that allowed Russian planners to select their moment with devastating accuracy. For individual NATO member nations that lost officers in the strike, the political implications are severe. These were not Ukrainian soldiers dying in a conflict on their own soil. These were serving military personnel from alliance nations, wearing uniforms of countries that are not officially at war with Russia, killed in a strike that demonstrated their vulnerability, despite all the assurances that they would be protected by distance, fortification, and air defense systems. European capitals are now facing questions from their own populations about why military officers were positioned in locations where they could be killed by Russian strikes, about what mission justifies that risk, and about what happens if Russia decides to expand targeting of NATO personnel beyond Ukraine's borders. The official fiction that NATO is simply providing advice and intelligence support becomes harder to maintain when alliance officers are being killed in bunker-penetrating strikes. According to Ukrainian officials and Western military spokesmen, the casualties from the Lviv strike have been thoroughly investigated, and the incident represents an unfortunate but isolated event that does not change the fundamental security situation for NATO advisory personnel. Pentagon briefers emphasized that the bunker had been struck, but suggested that the casualties resulted from secondary effects rather than direct penetration of the deepest sections of the complex. European defense ministries issued statements mourning the lost personnel while maintaining that their mission in Ukraine continues unchanged. The conflicting narratives, Russia claiming a successful penetration of a hardened bunker that killed NATO officers through direct strike effects, and Western officials acknowledging casualties while downplaying the weapon's performance, created the familiar pattern of competing claims that characterizes information warfare in this conflict. Independent verification of the exact strike dynamics remains difficult given the classified nature of the facility and the restrictions on journalist access to the site. For many analysts examining the available evidence, the specific mechanism of how the officers died matters less than the undeniable fact that they were killed in a facility that was supposed to be effectively invulnerable to Russian strikes. Whether the Kinzhal penetrated directly to the command level or whether the impact created catastrophic structural failure that compromised the bunker's integrity, the result demonstrates that Russia can strike targets that NATO believed were protected. In the absence of independent forensic analysis of the strike site, the truth of the exact penetration dynamics remains contested, but the strategic significance is clear. Russia demonstrated the capability and willingness to strike a facility hosting NATO personnel with a weapon system that existing air defenses could not intercept. That demonstration will influence every subsequent decision about where alliance personnel can operate and what missions they can safely undertake. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a moment where a single strike has fundamentally altered the risk calculation for NATO involvement in Ukraine. 12 alliance officers are dead. A bunker that was supposed to protect them was compromised. The weapon that killed them flew through hundreds of kilometers of defended airspace and penetrated hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete without being stopped. The entire premise of forward-deployed NATO advisory operations rested on the assumption that properly selected facilities and air defense coverage would provide adequate protection. The Kinzhal strike on Lviv directly challenges that assumption. It demonstrates that Russia possesses the capability to hold NATO personnel at risk in locations that were previously considered secure. And it does so with a weapon system that current alliance missile defense capabilities cannot reliably defeat. This is a story that will continue developing as European governments process the implications and as defense planners reassess force protection measures for deployed personnel. Legal Lens USA will keep you updated as new information emerges about both the immediate incident and the broader strategic adjustments that alliance nations make in response to this demonstrated capability. If this analysis helped you understand what actually happened in Lviv and why it matters beyond the immediate headlines, share this video with someone who needs to see it and drop a comment below. Do you think NATO can continue forward deployment of personnel in Ukraine given the vulnerability that Russia just demonstrated? Let us know what you think, because this conversation matters and your perspective matters. The Kinzhal has now proven in combat that it can penetrate fortifications that were designed to survive conventional and even some nuclear strikes. The defensive response to that capability remains years away from operational deployment, and in the meantime, every NATO officer, every command facility, every logistics hub in Ukraine operates under a threat that existing systems cannot reliably defend against. The answers are not clear yet. The strategic adjustments have not been fully defined yet. But the question has been asked loudly in one hypersonic strike on a bunker in western Ukraine.